Hey everybody, Jake here with TrendSpider to go over the weekend video into the second half of December and really go over the broad markets, crypto, and then some individual names as always, starting with SPY. And this week was just insane. You had big up days, you had huge down days, and at the end of the day, we did end up closing red and still closed within the ascending wedge support zone that we highlighted last week. But you can see here that we are starting to kind of get a little iffy going into the end of the year. You can see these huge volume bars. A lot of volume has kind of gone on over the last couple weeks, and could it be that the market's starting to price in these interest rate hikes that are being talked about into the new year? The tapering starting to come into effect. We'll just have to see what happens. But for now, you can see here on the weekly chart, we do have that price action still holding right within this this trend zone support, and we actually did hit a higher low, so that's something to also keep in mind on the weekly side. Now on the daily side, if you just look at the October low anchored VWAP, this is something that we've been looking at over the last couple weeks. We bounced here in early December, and then you can see here that we moved right back down, almost bounced off of it again today. We did hit a higher low above this area than we did in December. So that's something to also keep in mind. And going into next week, we'll just have to see if we do hold this October low anchored VWAP, and that's right around 456.50, 457 area. Remember, you always want to use these zones. And this is where I'd honestly actually add a little more margin of error. So I would actually add a percentage band and catch some of that price action that did break below the anchored VWAP previously. So I'm going to add a negative 1% anchored VWAP band here. So that means that I'm essentially adding another anchored VWAP 1% below the original one to capture some of this price action that did break down in early December. So this could really go anywhere from around 452 all the way up to around 456. And that gives you a lot more flexibility instead of just looking at an exact precise level. So that is SPY. Going into the Qs, a rough week here as well, but you can see that we did bounce off that October low anchored VWAP. Once again, we have this this offset here. So on this particular chart, the offset is a negative 1% as well. And you can see we bounced right within that area. We did not hold above the October low anchored VWAP, which is something to consider. Because that is starting to kind of break down a little bit, but we are still holding in this zone that we've had bounces in the past. And if you look at the volume by price from the October low, we just kept getting rejected every time we tried to get through this break-even supply. Remember, break-even supply is simply just shares that, in this case, got in around 396 to 398. As we drew down to the 370s and moved back up, those shares are kind of backing out and starting to break even, starting to take some off the table, and that's how this acts as a supply zone. Now, on the weekly side of things, you can see here that we also have a rough ascending wedge here. You can see that we've tested this area multiple times. So this is a pretty strong area of support, a zone of support, and you can see that we are right back at it. We could easily break down and move all the way down to the lower 370s shown by this support zone. But for now, we also did put in a higher low on the Qs. So one thing that we'll do is turn on the raindrop chart to kind of see what happened here on the daily chart. And you'll see here that we actually had a red day, but we had a green raindrop. So we also had a lot of that volume at the top of the range within the wick. So if we go back to the regular candle, you'll see here that there's this wick for Friday today. And if you go to the raindrop, you'll see that the volume profile, there's actually quite a bit in that wick. So that means that there was conviction by buyers when the price was up here. There were shares being absorbed up here by buyers for anyone who was selling those shares. So all in all, actually a relatively strong setup here going into the week ahead. And as I mentioned, you do have that higher low on the weekly candle for now. IWM surprisingly performed better on a week-by-week basis, at least, than SPY and the Qs. So if you go to the raindrop chart here, you'll see something interesting. Quite a bit of volume at the top of the range on Friday's raindrop as well. So even though we did pull back a little bit, so if we go to the hollow candle, you'll see here that we do have this wick, but within this wick, we have quite a bit of volume profile, which tells me that there was a group of buyers, demand, willing to absorb shares up here for anybody that was selling shares. So that, to me, signals some strength here going into the week ahead, going into really the week before Christmas. And it's interesting. This is the first time in a while where we're not going to have a short week from Christmas or New Year's. They both are on the weekend. So for options traders, that's good because you don't lose some of those days and get hit by theta. But all in all, you can see here that we are at this longer term area of support that goes back pretty much since January. You can see that we undercut this a couple times. So we'll have to see if this area holds. But you can see on the weekly chart, we are still holding this area. We have a wick here on the weekly chart. So, not what I'd call a textbook hammer, but you do have a lot of that wick kind of showing that there were buyers there willing to push the price back up, or you simply just had supply drying up down here as we were getting close to this previous support zone. So all in all, actually not looking too bad here. We do have a gap above. So if we turn on the gap snake here, let's put this to 0.2 to get these smaller gaps. You can see that we do have this gap above here right around 228.60. So if this thing did rip into the week ahead, that may be a target for a lot of people who do look at gaps as levels above or below to look at. So if you do turn on the gap snake again, you'll see we also have a gap below around 197. So if this area does not hold, that gap below could actually be a target for the bears. So all in all, we'll just have to see what happens. Let price action do its thing. Nobody's Nostradamus in the market. You just have to look at price action and go from there. Going into Bitcoin and Ethereum, just to get a little bit of a risk on, risk off sentiment in the markets, you'll see here on Bitcoin. Let's go to the hollow candle. You'll see here that we are starting to break down below this volume shelf. So if we anchor from the June low, you'll see here that the price is now once again below this volume shelf, below the point of control. Not necessarily the strongest price action, but we'll just have to see how this goes. The wick from that Friday crash a couple weeks ago is way down here at 42,000, give or take 100 or 200 bucks. That is something to keep in mind if we do start to inch lower. Notice that we are hitting these lower lows here. And if we really do start to break down, I wouldn't be shocked to see this 42,200, 300 area be tested below once again. Now, on the weekly chart, you'll see that Bitcoin is starting to break down through this trend zone. So that's also something that should be looked at here as potentially a bearish signal going into the rest of the year. This area has held really well multiple times as we moved up, but now we are starting to break down through it after breaking down a couple 2.5 or so weeks ago. That is definitely not the most bullish case, but as I mentioned, you have to just take things as they come. Right now, this is breaking down, but who knows? Maybe in a day or two, we have some huge, massive 2,000 or 3,000 point candle to the upside. Then the thesis may change there, or we simply are just going to maybe retest this previous support, act as resistance, and pull back. I'm not here to say what's going to happen. We're here to observe price action and go from there. So that's Bitcoin. Ethereum's looking very similar. They do trade generally pretty much in tandem. You'll see here that we are below the volume shelf here as well. And then we're kind of in no man's land down here with this volume gap. So not a lot of liquidity below. And if this did start to break down, you don't have a ton of liquidity until you get down to around 3,200, which is the June low anchored VWAP, but it's also the next volume shelf below and actually the point of control right around 3,250. That is definitely a little gives me a little concern and to be cautious. But for me, I just use crypto as kind of your risk on, risk off. But it's actually interesting to see that you have seen a little bit of decoupling from the equities markets in crypto because they were really trading almost hand in hand, and now they are starting to break away a little bit. On the weekly chart, very similar to Bitcoin, where you do have this breakdown starting to happen. It's just starting, so who knows? The weekly candle is not over yet. You could have a huge day on Saturday or Sunday, and this thing could close right back into this trend zone. So remember, these videos are done on Friday. The weekly candle doesn't close until Sunday for crypto. So you do have some unknowns here going into the weekend when you are watching this video over the weekend. You kind of have to look at the price and see, okay, is this still below this zone? But pretty much it would have to close near a high of the week for this to close back in the zone, shown by this red circle here. The top of that candle is right around 4150 or so. So we would really want to close above 4100 at the smallest amount for the weekly candle to look pretty good. Moving on to some individual names, Apple, the thing that's really helped the markets stay up because you have had a lot of bleeding underneath. But you'll see here that all we did over the last couple of days was simply retest this previous resistance zone, now acting as potential support. Not the most convincing candle here with a close below the previous day's low, but all in all, you are just really retesting this diagonal resistance, now acting as potential support. Now, if you go to the weekly chart, you'll see here that we are kind of at this longer term resistance as well. Not what I'd call the strongest weekly candle here, but we will see what happens going into the rest of the year, which is winding down pretty quick. Tesla is the next one. This one tested the gap below perfectly. You had a bounce on Friday, and you can see here that we're pretty much at the very tip of the falling wedge here, the apex. So at this point, it's either going to probably have a pretty big move to the upside or the downside. With these types of setups, you can't really tell where it's going to go. One thing I would say on the bull case is that we did fill this gap below. That's something to consider. But if you turn on the gap snake, you'll see that there's also another gap below here around 843, 842 or so. So that is something to consider on the downside if this does start to break down. And then you do have this gap way above around 1200 to the upside. On the weekly time frame, all we're really doing at this point is simply just retesting this previous high here from January, which is now acting as potential support going into the end of the year. We'll see if this actually continues to break down, but if this gap did fill below, that would kind of be right in line with this previous resistance acting as potential support going into the rest of the year. So Tesla, kind of hard to say here. Let's look at the raindrop just to see what's going on within that wick here. And you'll see we actually do have quite a bit of volume within that wick. So same thing that we talked about earlier. If you have volume within a wick, that means that there were some aggressive buyers with conviction willing to absorb supply when the price was moving up. So all in all, not the worst setup, but we just have to let price action do its thing. Next one is NEO. NEO. This is an interesting one. Closed green for Friday, at least on the raindrop chart. So you can see here that this diagonal support goes back quite a ways. It goes back since the summer, and you can see we bounced off of it multiple times. So we bounced here, and these are red circles, but these were bounce areas. Here, barely missed it here, and then we're here once again. We'll see if this is another bounce area, but the one thing I will mention, if you look at this on the weekly chart, we are breaking down below the COVID low and actually closing below it, something that we have not done yet since COVID. That is definitely a reason to be cautious here. And we are also breaking down through this previous zone, this horizontal zone, another reason to be cautious. So I guess on the bull side, you do have a relatively strong raindrop with a lot of that volume at the top of the range. And then you do have a gap above. So that gap would fill right around 30, let's just call it 33 or so. So, with any chart that you look at, you have to look at the bull case. You have to look at the bear case. If you're not looking at the other side of the trade, then you're allowing your bias to get into the charts, where if you're looking at both the bull and the bear, you're never going to be thrown off. You're always going to know both scenarios, whether it's good or bad, and you should always have a level that okay, this trade is invalidated. If not, you're really not following any type of plan, and that's a good way to blow up your account or lose a lot of money in the market. Next one is AMC. This thing's still alive. That's always good to see. You'll see here that we do have this downward sloping channel here. And we did have a nice bounce, And going on the weekly chart, you'll see that we also had a nice bounce here off of this January anchored VWAP. So this is down here, way down here before the huge move started. So this was kind of the bottom. This is the reversal point that we want to measure the volume weighted average price. This is really when the status quo changed. And you'll see here that this has been an area in the past that we've had some bounces. We did have a little bit of craziness around this area. But the main thing is we did hold it, and we've bounced off this area now 3 times over the last 3 weeks. So the fact that we did close above it is something to consider. And who knows, maybe at the end of the year you'll get some of these meme stocks to really get a big move to the upside. But all in all, this is what I'd call a pretty strong weekly candle here for AMC. Now on the last chart that we'll go over is AMD. Same thing, we did have a bounce off of this swing low here. So it's not from January of 21 like we just saw on AMC, but this is our previous area where we pretty much reversed before new all-time highs. And you'll see that we bounced right off of that area. So almost to the penny. And we now have 4 red weeks in a row, 4 red closes in a row. And if you turn on the patterns button, the patterns indicator up here, and just type in 4, you can actually look and see how many other times have there been 4 red closes in a row. Not too many times. So you can see that we had 4 red closes in a row, all of these times that are highlighted. So generally this has been a bounce area. So 4 red closes in a row, 4 red closes in a row. This is one that you did have a little bit of a dead cat bounce. 4 red closes in a row, started a huge move to the upside. Here's where you had a lot of red closes in a row, but this was also during 2018 where you had just that huge move to the downside. So the point is you haven't had a ton of times where you've had 4 red weekly closes in a row. And, maybe selling is exhausted, but the main thing I would be watching for is a hold above this swing low anchored VWAP here, which is right around, give or take a couple bucks, right around 130. And we'll see if that holds going into the week ahead. The last thing that I'll say about this is you do have a little bit of a, if you want to get creative, maybe a little bit of an inverse head and shoulders trying to form here. But all in all, for now, it's really not too mature here as far as that formation goes. We'll just have to see how it plays out into the week ahead. But all in all, it was a very mixed week. One thing that was interesting is you did see some of these small cap names, these growth names, actually have some decent days on Friday, even though the market had a relatively rough day. That could be a sign of things starting to exhaust on the tax loss selling side of things, but we'll just have to see how that plays out into the last couple weeks of the year. Hopefully this video is helpful getting an idea of how the overall markets look, how crypto looks, and how some of these individual names look going into the week before Christmas. For those that celebrate, hopefully everybody has a great holiday. And for those that don't, hope you have a great end to the year. And we'll see you. We won't be doing a weekend video next weekend, but we'll likely do one the weekend after that to close up the year. And remember, if you do enjoy these videos, please like and subscribe. And if you have not signed up for TrendSpider yet, we do have that 7-day free trial that you can take advantage of and give the platform a shot before you have to lock in any type of commitment. And we have the hello@TrendSpider.com team there to help you with any questions. We have TrendSpider University. We have the TrendSpider Technical Analysis Series on YouTube. So a lot of different resources to help you be successful using the platform. Everybody have a great weekend, and thanks for watching.